finest programs you find anywhere around the globe. And now it's time for another episode, an epic episode of Groove a Swing Speaks. Before I get started, I see two of my panelists here. I see Tiffany. Hey, Tiffany, how are you?
Hello, hello everyone. How are you guys?
I'm
Hello. Hey,
doing
Tiffany.
great. And I see my brother, Sergeant Clayton Brown.
Good evening, Will. How are
So
you?
let's get doing pretty well, pretty well, pretty well. Let's get into it right now because we have a very special guest with us tonight, and I'm just going to read a little bit of her accomplishments and credentials, and I want you to meet Iris Settle. Okay, powerhouse master teacher and trainer, strategist, former city executive, client relations to professional athletes and celebrities, and financial strategist to educators, all right, and federal employees, from leading crisis response in Georgia for tens of thousands up to awarding scholarships through her nonprofit. She's now entering a bold new decade focused on legacy, leadership, and impact with a metaphysical twist. Don't miss this episode of a dynamic launch coming with this Charleston, South Carolina native, a woman who's transforming lives one strategy at a time. Let's talk a little bit about her education. Let's see, music major at Florida A&M University, Tallahassee, Florida. BA, middle education, Bennett College, Greensboro, North Carolina, December 1981. MA and MED, Miami University, Oxford, Ohio, middle school education and higher education administration, May 1983. Doctoral candidate, metaphysical science, University of Metaphysics in Sedona, Arizona. And there's more. There is more. Her goal is in this last decade is to tell stories of those individuals, families, and organizations who made incredible contributions in our communities, schools, churches, and organizations between the 1950s to the early 2000s than many aren't aware of. And many of our stories and contributions are not documented online due to a lack of technology during that time period, during the 1950s and the early 2000s, due to a collapse of once cultural outlets that no longer exist to tell our stories, to even be shared. Hence, telling the story of superstars like James the Bird Sparrow. James has been on this network before. Those of her family and others and communities, or our families and others and communities who made incredible contributions but are not documented online for the next generations is the goal. Welcome to the set, Miss Iris Subtle. Thank you so much for coming on with us tonight, and
Thank
we really
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you. So glad to be here. So
Good
so
Yes.
evening.
glad to be here. I was trying to get James to hear, but I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to do that because I had it set up for a microphone.
Okay, I understand. I understand. Well, hopefully he can hear. As a matter of fact, you are doing a lot of excellent work, and you have done throughout the decade. Got a quick
Yes.
question to ask you.
Yeah.
And so, were you part of that Marching 100 at Florida A&M?
Well, actually, I tried out for the Marching 100. When I was in high school, I was planning for my senior year, and my dad wanted to retire early, and so he's like, "Iris, you only need English." He said, "I'm sending you to college." So I had the 5 colleges that I wanted to go to already to apply for the next year, because that senior year is your favorite year. So I lost my senior year. Had no idea when I went to FAMU that it was going to be the second year that they even allowed women on the band.
Hmm.
Now, for someone to understand the dynamic of that, you would have to understand the dynamic of me being able as a first and second grader to attend an integrated school in South Carolina in Charleston, and then had the state superintendent of South Carolina call my dad and says, "You're getting a promotion. I need you to help integrate Orangeburg County schools," because of the Orangeburg massacre. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Orangeburg massacre, that's when the South Carolina State Patrol came through and decided that even though the students at South Carolina State College at the time in Orangeburg wanted to all they wanted to do was bowl, and they weren't allowed to bowl. So because of that, the South Carolina State Patrol came. They were having a bonfire for the next day. They had about 4 or 5 players that were heading to the NFL. That's how it was back in 1968. And lo and behold, they just started firing shots at students, unarmed students, as they were running away from the South Carolina State Patrol.
That's
So
incredible.
you had chaos within this county that had not been integrated because of racial hostility. And for those of you who are familiar with Bakari Sellers, you might often see him on CNN, his dad at that time was the president of the student body at South Carolina State. And they incited him for the riot. He had to do jail time for it. But I can't imagine anyone going to the University of South Carolina and starting shooting students, even in 1968. So what it was an opportunity for me to learn that, that things are truly different for different people. And I just thank God for that environment. So here I was, a kid that fought from the 3rd grade till I got out of high school, proving to these white folks that I was just as good as, that we could be friends, that we could love each other. And then I hit Florida A&M, a school where women on the band were not wanted.
Mm.
It was my dream since a 2nd grader, to go to school there, so it didn't dawn on me that I could that there was anything I couldn't do, but that was the thing that got me. So after being beat up a couple of times and realizing this is not what I came here for, I came to an HBCU so I could be loved, not
Right.
so I could be beaten and hated because I was a girl. I was beaten and hated because I was Black. So it was just the time for me. So Dad said, well, you got to stay there. You got to stay there and finish out the year. So I did. He said, decide where you want to transfer. So that's how I ended up in Greensboro at Bennett College for Women, with a sister school to Morehouse. A lot of people think Spelman is because of proximity, but it's the same with A&T and Bennett, with proximity, we just adopt each other. But it was one of the best experiences for me because, my God, some of the best teachers I've ever had in my life taught me how to go anywhere and be anything. And so for that, I was grateful. So to answer your question, I know it was a long question, but imagine wanting to be on that band, not even dawning in your mind that there was nobody like you in it until the year previously.
Oh,
So
boy.
that year, there were 6 of us. One was my roommate, and one was a good friend from Paterson, New Jersey, of mine. And I did concert band, but I really wanted to study music. And the more I went to classes, the more I realized, well, maybe there are other things I might want to do. And so that's how everything happened. So it was it was an incredible band, but oh my God, was it a shocking experience for me? When is this little Black girl who just wants to love everybody because she understands everybody, because she can feel everybody? Why can't they love us? So that was a grown-up experience for me. I thank God for it. I really, really do. I thank God for it.
What I found interesting also, and there's so many interesting things I've read in your bio, and right now you are telling stories about things that happened from the 50s to the early 2000s. And what stands out into you in your mind? Because there's so much there. And are
Yeah.
you documenting this? And it is in a book.
Well, what I did was I went on ChatGPT and I said, okay, I need to find out how lucrative this is. And actually it's from the mid 1800s because the mid 1800s were when my grandparents were born.
Okay.
My parents had us late in life. And, my grandmother was born in 1860, to give you some idea. And grew up on the plantation where my great grandfather was her daddy, so that was just the lifestyle of Virginia, at the time where she was from. And so she found this, handsome, incredible, chocolate, gorgeous man while she was there in Virginia, and they moved to Pennsylvania. And so So that's why I wanted to tell the story. So much history of not only this country stems out of Philadelphia, but that's why I wanted to tell the story, because when I would ask, Daddy, who's that white lady on the mantle? And he would just look at me and say, baby, that's mama. So to me as a little girl, that's just how she looked to me, but I just wanted to know who these family members were. And they did incredible things, but if you Google them, you won't find a lot of people.
You don't find it.
You won't
That's
find it.
actually-
And that's what ChatGPT told me. That it's like it's very lucrative, and it also could be very financially rewarding because people are searching for these stories. And one thing that I know that I've been good at, because I've been around some of the best storytellers in my life, is how to tell a story and to draw people in so that they want to participate and they want to be able to feel the characters and they want to be able to see what was happening. They wanted to delve into them as a human being and all their flaws, their good things and their bad. So yeah, so that's what I plan to do. The launch for me is going to be in June, as I launch these stories in June, and one of those stories will be coming, in the fall, and that's the one of James the Bird Sparrow. Because when I started talking to him, I'm like, James, this has to be a movie. Who has a life like this? This has to be a movie. So that's what happened there. So there's so many incredible stories if we dare to ask people questions. And that's the one thing I taught as I was graduating from Bennett, and we had a senior project in front of the director of the communications department. He said, oh my God, you should have majored in communications. He said, do you know what you could do with journalism? And I said, well, that's not really what I don't think that's where my heart is. I think that's just something I'll do later on. And even though my dad was part owner of a radio station, I never really thought about it, from that standpoint. It was a small little station in Georgetown, South Carolina. But yes, stories need to be told. I mean, because if you think about your mommy, your auntie, your brother, your sister, your principal, your teacher, your pastor, some of these folks have done incredible things that we will never know about because they were born between that time when things weren't documented.
Do you ever envision your work being turned into a screenplay or a movie or anything of that nature?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, James and I were in Washington, D.C. just last week, and we're invited by a friend of ours who was responsible for the 6888, and that's the battalion that Tyler Perry did the movie about. And that were the only Black regiment that went to Europe during World War II. And what their responsibility was to deliver millions and millions pieces of mail in 90 days. And you would think that would be impossible, but the beautiful thing about the 6888, if you haven't seen that movie, please tune in because it is awesome. Grab some tissue, it's truly awesome. And because one of the main characters, grew up in right outside of Philadelphia, I really could feel it because even when the movie started, I was like, that looks like Philadelphia. That kind of thing, where my dad and his sisters and brothers, they could go to an integrated school in the 30s, so that was quite different for them than the 30s and late, and later in the 40s. So it's a great, great movie. But what she said to me, she said, Iris, I need to talk to you because I need for you to help me tell some more stories. And I said, really? She said, yes, I need you to help me tell the story of your aunt. And my aunt was one of the first officers in the WAC, the Women's Army Corps in World War II. And she was a historian. She taught at Howard University and also at Bowie State, and got her doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania and her master's and bachelor's at Howard University because of the GI Bill. The interesting thing about the 6888, though, that I thought was fascinating, because that ceremony was at the Capitol, and it was a beautiful, beautiful ceremony in Emancipation Hall with a lovely reception afterwards at the Library of Congress right across the street. And one of the things that the colonel said, Colonel Edna Cummings, and she was responsible for working with Tyler to get that documentary put into a movie. What she said was that 82% of the women in the 6th 888 Battalion were college graduates.
Whoa, that is incredible.
1942, 1943.
Yeah.
85%. Where in the world can you find anybody going into any armed service? But that was an opportunity. That GI Bill provided other opportunities. And even though my aunt told me, she said, Iris, when she was alive, she says, it's nice to have, a master's degree and all that. She said, but when I graduated, I couldn't even get a job.
Wow.
Couldn't get a job.
Couldn't get
She
a
said,
job.
She said, unless I taught at a school or something, but she said, I didn't want to do that. There were other things that I wanted to do. So that's the beautiful thing that I think stories do, is that they wake up other people who have no idea what our plight has been and what we've been through and the resilience that we're able to have. I mean, this woman had incredible resilience because that's what she wanted to do. We weren't able to get to her burial in 2008 because my brother worked for Delta Airlines and we were trying to leave out of Atlanta and there was a tornado. So tornado warnings. So I was like, oh my God. We did get to go to the funeral a couple of months earlier at Howard University in the chapel. But when you're in Arlington National Cemetery, you just don't have the funeral and they bury you that day. It's usually, months later. And I remember my childhood friend calling me up on the phone and Daryl said, Iris. I said, well, she said, what you doing? He said, are you in DC? And I'm like, no, we couldn't go because of the tornado. He said, oh my God. He said, Aunt Martha's funeral is on TV. And she was in Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation. Okay. And so that's how we got to the 6th 888. I don't know if you guys can see this book. Yeah, this book actually, and then The Greatest Generation. This book actually was on the New York selling list for about 2 years. And I was so proud of Aunt Martha. I don't know if you guys can see this picture.
Yes, let me see if I can blow up the screen.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
There she is as a lieutenant.
Outstanding.
Wow. Yes.
One of the first commissioned officers in the WAC. And it didn't happen because of that. It happened because of the culture of our environment when we grew up. It was because Mary McLeod Bethune got with Eleanor Roosevelt and said, look, we need to utilize the GI Bill as an opportunity to help educate Black women. Because the Women's Army Corps was something that was new, women being in the Army. Now, let me share something to you that's probably the most heartbreaking thing that you might think. I remember talking to Aunt Martha as she loved coming to Charleston. And that's going to be the bulk of the history that I want to tell and the stories I want to tell. Because when it comes to Charleston, everybody thinks of it because of slavery, slave ships and all that. But when I was a student at the College of Charleston who took summer courses when I came home, because I was like, I can't sit home and not go to class or something. I got to do something. I have my little job over here, but I got to do something. So I went into the archives of the College of Charleston's library. Now, the College of Charleston was founded in the late 1700s because Charleston was founded in 1670. Now, think about that for a minute. We weren't even a country. 1670, it was founded. So I go into the archives and I was like, well, let me look up, because you know how folks love to save stuff and just tell you that things are happening and all that kind of stuff. So I go into the archives. And when I go into the archives, the most beautiful thing I see was no ships barely coming into Charleston. But what I did see were a bunch of ships leaving Charleston with us on it.
Wow.
I said to myself, And this was before YouTube and the internet. I mean, the internet didn't really come into play until the late 2000s, late 1900s, early 2000s. I remember when I had an email address and with Prodigy, and I couldn't even send anybody an email because nobody had an email address, but that's technology. But when I looked at that, I thought, I'll be damned. We weren't imported, we were exported. Think about that for a minute.
Exported to
Exported to the Caribbean, exported to Africa, exported up the coast towards the north part of the United States. We were sent around the peninsula of Florida into Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama along the Gulf. Barbados. If you talk to somebody in Barbados and you listen to a native Charlestonian, they sound identical. The tone and the gullah is extremely close together, so that was something that really amazed me and made me realize, because all my life everybody's like, don't you want to go to Africa? Don't you want to be in Africa? And I'm like, no, I'm good. And they're like, well, how come you don't really want to go? I said, I have nothing against Africa. That's where everything originated from. I don't have a problem with it. I said, but for whatever reason, and I'm an empath, so I can feel a lot of things. I said to myself, I feel like I'm from here. I feel like I'm from here. And so that's how that all began, was me looking to find out who was I. When I looked at all these Indian names around South Carolina and Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi, I kept saying to myself, where are the people? How can you have all these things named after something? Where are the people? Don't tell me it was the American Indian War. Not that many people died. People died, but not that many for there not to be any people.
Mm-hmm.
We already know that Columbus, didn't discover America, but I'm talking about us being here tens of thousands of years before Europeans ever thought of coming in this direction, because the only people that could utilize ships and cruise and go explore were Africans.
Absolutely.
So why would, when you think about it, when you look at where Africa is situated in terms of to the United States, and you think, and they tell the story that, oh, they went up to Canada first. Why would you do all that? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any sense. That would be like me saying, oh, instead of going to California, I'm going to go to the moon. That just doesn't make any sense. But that's the culture. And then when you think about South America, that's why you feel so close to your brothers and your sisters, in South America, because that's where we came through, and then we migrated.
This is absolutely fascinating. Clayton, you were about to say something?
No, I was just saying, wow, because I'm just sitting back and soaking all this in. What she's telling me is astonishing.
It is.
I don't know what to say to that other than, wow. Hey,
Well, the thing that really gets to you there, Clayton, is in order, when you hear it, you got to ask yourself, well, why were we lied to?
I got an idea.
And
yes.
when you think of, and trust me, I mean, I have nothing against people who are not of the color that we are, because Black is a negative term, and I don't like using it because of the power that it really denotes. But I don't have a gripe with anybody. I remember when I was in the 3rd grade, and we were heading to integrate that school. My brother was in the 2nd grade. And we got on the school bus. Stuart is a little bit lighter than I am. And we got on the bus. He's a 2nd grader. I'm a 3rd grader. And this girl who was in the 6th grade pushed him on the floor of the bus and said, "Get out of my seat." And so I said, look at all these seats on this bus. I'm a third grader. All of these seats on this bus, you leave him alone. If you mess with him one more time, you're gonna have to mess with me.
Right.
And so she went and she hit him again. And she said, "You darky."
Mm.
And I said to myself, "Excuse me." You know what I'm saying? I'm like, "Excuse me." She was a so-called Native American Indian,
Hmm.
okay, that was a part of the Cherokee tribe in a particular part of South Carolina called, up in specific area, Holly Hill, Goose Creek, up in that area. And the name that they were called were Brass Ankles, which I thought that's just as bad as calling somebody redneck as far as I'm concerned. Okay. But they were called Brass Ankles. And I said to her, I said, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "You're 5 shades darker than he is. And you're calling him a darkie?"
Wow.
And
Yeah.
she just looked at me and the other little white kids on the bus, because I had gone to school with white kids before, so it wasn't anything, new to me. But we had to be there to integrate everything. There were teachers' kids and preachers' kids that initiated every single school integration in America. When you go back and think about it, there were preachers' kids because everything stemmed from the church, okay? And teachers' kids because they understood the schooling that would had to go through. So we were the sacrificial lambs for that. And because I was just fine going to school in Charleston, there was culture there was a whole lot. Now I'm going to this rural town, where I can't go to the ballet and, I can't go to my ballet classes during the week because there are no ballet classes, 60 miles away. So it was just an experience that I treasure because it allowed me the opportunity to take in the differences of people. And we are not that good at being able to accept people who are different. We always have to find out how we can make ourselves feel more superior. And that particular reason has a lot to do with the fear of knowing who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Because once you find out and realize who you are, then there are things that you just won't do that you normally do. There are things you just won't say. There are things you just won't read. There's things that you just won't, do simply because you know better. And I have known that I was always here to tell a story. I just didn't know what story it was. I thought my story was to teach kids so that they could have better lives. But it turned out to be a lot bigger than that in terms of what my story was. So for me, it didn't matter if I was talking to this young kid about how I could help them get, $50,000, $60,000 to go to college because of relationships of somebody over here. Or it was for me to tell any NBA or NFL player or entertainer that, this is something that can help you be better in terms of who you are. It was no different to me. I never looked at different people a certain way because of who they were, separate from the mainstream. And so that's the one thing that I learned, growing up, was that we all add value. Every last one of us add value. So that's why like I said, when I heard stories like James Sparrow, and there's so many other stories,
Mm-hmm.
when I hear stories like Aunt Martha, I remember my aunt, her sister, Aunt Cassie. She was also in the military, and Cassie said she got a phone call, and she said, "Iris, I got that. Remember, I got that phone call from about Aunt Martha being on Tom Brokaw's and being in his book." I said, "Yeah." She said, "I got another phone call." She said, because Martha's very private. She doesn't give everybody her number. "I got another phone call. Well, since she's been in Tom Brokaw's book, uh, Eisenhower High School, where we graduated from, now all of a sudden they want her to be in the honor society."
Mm.
Now imagine you're the valedictorian. There's nothing higher in academics and other extracurricular activities than the valedictorian of a high school. But she nor my dad were able to be in the honor society. in Pennsylvania. You know, so these were some of the things that that really made my heart turn, because the writings are not so much for telling the stories, but getting people to think. You know, because I want to know, what is it about me, and you don't even know me, that gets you to hate me? You don't even know me.
Mm.
What is it? Is it because you know who I really am, and that scares you? It should.
Mm-hmm.
It should. And that's what this would disgust me a lot about our young people. They don't know who they are. They don't know who they are because their parents didn't tell them who they are, and their parents didn't tell them who they were. And we can't tell somebody something we don't know, but we can learn. We all can learn how to tell those stories. And we're in the information age. I sat down and said to ChatGPT, because that's my new buddy. I said, ChatGPT, I said, I have a question. I said, how lucrative is it for me to be able to tell stories of those individuals between the mid 1850s into the year 2000 who made tremendous contributions to communities, but just aren't on the internet, simply because most of the periodicals they would be in newspapers of people of color, or TV shows, or radio shows of color that might not even be in business today or archived anywhere. ChatGPT came back very quickly and said it would be very lucrative and extremely profitable, because there is no niche. There is no niche for telling our story. What kind of craziness is that?
Mm.
Between the 1850s to 2000,
Wow.
that blew me away. I kind of figured it would, because when I look at my mother and I look at my dad and I look at people I went to church with and I looked at people who were in politics and people who were in business, and I Google them, I don't get anything, because they were in the Chicago Defender, or they were in, you know, the Charleston Black Paper, or the Orangeburg Black Paper, or the Columbia Black Paper, or on WPL, the Black radio station that no longer exists, on AM. So our stories are so important, and we are so resilient. I've worked with James when we've worked with young people, and we talk to them about their minds and their capability, and how brilliant they are, and how God planted them here to do great things. And the things they were able to accomplish was unbelievable,
Mm-hmm.
just by the power of belief. Just by the power of belief. You know, and so I hope you can tell that I'm extremely passionate about my people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Absolutely.
passionate about most people who love people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not my mission to help everybody. We can't help everybody. You know, you have to figure out what your niche is and what you're going to do. Mine is enlightenment. And it
Yeah.
took me 50 years to realize that's what it was.
I think you're right on time, though, Iris. And I do appreciate you being here. I
Thank you.
thank you for your wisdom. I thank you
Thank you.
for sticking in there and telling your story, because even though it took 50 years, you're right on time.
Yes.
Because we need that today. They are trying to erase everything that we
Yes.
know, what
Yes.
we're about. You really answered that question, why?
Yeah.
Because it is the fear.
It is.
When they start using that word supremacist, they still want to be at the top of the food chain when they
Yes.
realize they didn't get there on their own.
Right.
They
Right.
stole everything that we had. I wouldn't say everything, but
Yeah, they
majority
did.
of those inventions and,
Yes.
and accolades and the things that we did,
Yes,
They took credit for it.
they did.
And you was mentioning the sisters that were in the military that did that job within what 3 months?
2 months. Well, they
It was
gave them 90 days, and they did it in
90
2
days.
months.
They gave them 90 days, and they did it in 2 months.
Hmm.
It was the same thing with the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yes,
I'm a
and I
retired
met
air,
and I met a number of them. I mean,
yeah,
and it would have meeting. The stories they
Mhm.
would tell, because again, my brother worked for Delta, so he had access to the Tuskegee Airmen. So you know what I'm saying?
absolutely. Because
It
we
was
had to
just
learn that
amazing.
history. I'm
Yes,
a retired Air Force, and it
thank you
hurt
for your
me to my
service.
heart when you more than welcome. It hurt me to my heart when they were started to talk about taking them out of the history books.
Yes,
We all had to learn that history,
yeah,
and most of the history was about what the white airmen did.
yeah,
Uh, the
yeah,
Medal of Honor recipients,
yeah,
when they know a lot of the times they put us out there on the front lines. They
yeah,
put us out there to do all the dirty work, but
yes,
they took the accolades and for themselves and
yes.
got rewarded for it when they
Hmm.
know they did not accomplish these missions.
That's true.
The Tuskegee Airmen was flawless.
Yep.
Those brothers were flawless.
Over 1533 stories
Yes,
without a
without
casualty,
losing.
without a
Yep.
loss.
Yep. It's
You
incredible.
know,
It's incredible.
it's totally
And there's
incredible.
and their stories were incredible. They had, because a number of them were in Atlanta, and every third or fourth, I think, week, Thursday or something of the month, they would meet at Starbucks, and I would go with
Mm.
my brother over there.
Oh
it
wow.
was
Yeah.
it was a beautiful experience, just being able to talk to them and what it was like, and you know um, just our capacity,
Yeah.
our
Mhm.
capacity. There is. I'm going to share with you guys. I'll email it. I'll send it to you.
And
It's a,
Oh, she froze.
they trying to
email
cut
that
out,
came out.
excuse me.
No, go
No, I
on,
didn't hear
Iris.
you. They're trying to cut out what? No, I
No,
said there there was
they was
there
trying
was
to
an
cut out a
article.
lot of the journalists nowadays.
Yes.
Certain news links
Yeah.
they don't want
Yes.
people to
Yes.
exist anymore.
Mhm.
Right.
Critical race theory. They don't
Yes.
books out of the libraries. Who does that
Yeah. But
Mhm.
see,
if they're not trying to
for
hide something?
me, when they do that for me, that's okay, because there was never a teacher that sat down with me and gave me and told me the books that I needed to read. My parents did that. You see what I'm
Mm.
saying?
Yeah.
So they took me to the library. You know what I'm saying? And did that. You don't need to go to the library now. Everything's online in terms of what you would need,
Mhm.
and all of that. But our stories, I'd be damned, like I said, if I leave this planet without telling our stories. And it doesn't have to be the grandiose stories of someone who achieved up here. I'm
Right.
talking about the small little wins down here
Yeah.
that made
Mhm.
everything possible, so that we can improve our lives. And as and when you look at those organizations that were put in charge to help us get that information, they've simply failed us. They really have.
Yeah.
But we do what we know. We do what we know.
Mhm.
Um, because the church has lost its way. It really has. I'm a PK. I watched my dad um, be moved to a church in 1963 that had 800 members, and then within a decade he grew it to 2,500 members, and then 3,500 members, and then we had to go move into a new big old church because there wasn't enough room for the church, and then he bought a Jewish synagogue, from the business owners that he worked with in Charleston, and now that property is worth over $10 million.
Wow.
And in 1979, okay,
Wow.
from
Okay.
1978, to 1980, 18 months, that $1.2 million mortgage was paid for clear, free and clear.
That's incredible. You know, I love
Right.
your passion and the power. See, I know with you telling your stories, you inspire people, you know,
Yes,
because if we know our history,
that's it.
especially like you said, those small wins, right? That would mean so much
Yes,
to someone, some young kid
yes,
hear that, and to let them know you can do this. You know,
yes.
a decades ago, I mean, I was probably in grade school or uh, high school, whatever it is, and the question came to my mind: if we are, as a black culture, I know some
Hmm.
people don't like using that word black, but as a culture,
Yes,
if we are inferior, why did they want us to read in the first place? Because guess what? If you're superior to me, it
right,
doesn't matter what I know, right? Because
right.
you're superior. And I said, that's the first lie, or that's one of many lies we've been
Oh
told
yeah,
that you
oh
are
yeah,
inferior. Well, give me a book. Let me compete. Why
right,
don't you want me to compete?
right.
Okay. So they come up with all this stuff, which they don't know. Well, DEI. Well, he must be the big, well, hell, that's not what DEI means in the first place.
No,
So
it
they
doesn't.
baptized that term, right?
Right.
And so forth and so on. But I'm going to go to Tiffany. I'm sure she has a question for you because we're
Okay.
all sitting back and just absorbing uh, what you said, you know.
Yeah, because I'm just
Tiffany,
touching this. I'm just touching the surface. Okay, Tiffany.
I'm loving this. I'm absolutely loving this. Tiffany?
Yeah.
I am too. It's so much that I wanted to ask. Okay, because first
Uh-huh.
off, what kind of threw me was when you said your grandparents, not your great grand, was
Yes.
born in the 1860s, and then you
Yes.
said your parents had you late in
Yes.
life. When you say late, if you don't mind me asking, what do you mean late in life?
In their 40s.
Okay, okay, okay. And how many siblings do you have?
There are three of us.
Okay.
I have two brothers.
Oh wow. Are you the
Yeah,
oldest?
I'm in the middle.
Oh,
I'm in the
okay.
middle. My oldest brother, we're 6 years apart, and then my youngest brother, we're 2 years apart.
Okay. Okay. And then all of you guys, I take it, all of you are college graduates.
Oh, yeah, that was a requirement.
That was see,
And
and that's
and it,
what I,
and it wasn't a requirement so that we could have a college degree and get a job.
mhm.
Okay. Because I see a lot of creators now, they're out there and they'll tell you, oh, you might have spent $250 on that college education, but how much do you make? That's not why we were there to get that college degree. Just like with the 6888, that college degree allows you to do something, if you apply yourself right, to be a critical thinker
Mhm.
and to be able to understand and to
Yeah.
solve problems. Okay.
Mhm.
So I might not be making seven figures. Okay. But I have been able to help solve seven-figure problems, if that
I know
makes
that's
sense.
right.
You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
That's
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of figuring out how do I bring those two together,
Mhm.
so that I'm working with people so it's profitable for us as teams. Because one thing that our community used to do is we all used to work together. We didn't care who got the credit for what. We used to all work together and help one another. It wasn't like somebody had to stand out or she's getting too much attention. It was about the purpose. We understood why we were doing things. We do things today, nobody even tells us why we're doing it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mm.
And we never even ask. So that's a great question. But yeah, there's so many stories to have. And I want to be able to pull stories out of you guys.
Mhm.
Mhm. My thing is, we were sitting here talking about, you were sitting here talking about the history and, especially coming out of Charleston
Yes.
and the massacre that happened. And
Yes.
I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not, but I just came across on social media a couple of days ago. There's a lady that experienced the Tulsa massacre and she's 111 years old today. Well,
Yes.
she was 111 years old 2 days ago,
Yeah.
and she is. I think she's the oldest living
She is.
survivor,
She
which
is.
it blows my mind because she still has her wits and stuff.
Yes, she does.
111
Mhm.
years old.
She
You know
did.
what I'm saying?
Incredible.
Yes, because it was 100. I think it was she was born in 1921, if I'm not mistaken.
1914.
1914. Okay, so I was working with someone who was working to get her to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, but she wasn't able to get there because they thought it would be very, nice for her to be on the stage and all that kind of stuff. So, yes, the Tulsa massacre was something else, and it gives you an idea as to what we were. We were Black Wall Street, just like my grandfather
That's
said.
right.
Don't get mad at me because I have a profitable and successful business. You don't want me coming to your grocery store. You don't want me buying from your gas station. You don't want me cleaning your clothes. You don't want to clean my clothes. So if you're in a town where the majority of the people look like me, then I'm going to make more money than you. That's just a simple math. I don't have no college education, just a third grade education, but that makes sense to me.
Right.
And that's how it was. We had everything. Tulsa had its own airport in the 20s.
Wow.
Everything.
They had their own bank.
And they massacred those people and
Mhm.
built the daggone interstate on top of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And on top of the legacy.
And that's why what you do is so powerful because, like Clayton mentioned earlier, they're trying to erase everything.
Yes.
They even trying to get rid of and I was talking to James earlier today, and he was telling me how you went to the African American Museum.
Yes, we did.
And they're trying to take everything. They're trying to defund that.
Yes.
So the question goes back, why? Because they know, in many cases, they know the power that we possess better than we do.
Well, it's not so much the power that we possess, it's that we're in the information age. So because we're in the information age, we can get access to all kinds of information. So if they can put a halt on us getting information, I don't know how they're going to do it, because ChatGPT done took it somewhere else. That's like having 5 to 7 employees working for you every day. So that's the thing. And one of the things that my dad always told me, because as a pastor, I used to ask him, I said, Dad, how can people look at us the way they look at us? And then out of their mouth still talk about how they're Christians, they love God. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It didn't make sense to me, because I don't know you and I don't agree with how you think. And you think the way you think because somebody taught you that. Now, one thing I do know that hatred is taught, and I had that debate with my high school friends all the time, and they're like, Iris, you always got to go there. Yeah, I'm going to go there. Right. Let me give me an example. We had our high school reunion. All of us graduated like in the 70s, the late 70s, mid to late 70s, right? So our high school's no longer there. We were the kids that came in and integrated it and everything back in the day. And so we're sitting at a friend's house. She lives on the lake and everything. We're having a good time. These are some of my best friends. It's me, my brother, and a girlfriend of his. We're the only Black people in the house. Everybody else is white. We just talk. And they're my friends. We talk on, we're on Facebook and everything like that. We were in classes together from the 5th grade all the way up to high school. I know these people, right?
Right.
So all of a sudden, this guy walks into the house. Right, and he's drunk with a bandana on top of his head, with the Confederate flag on it. Mm. So he busts into the door, and who does he run into? My brother. We call him Wikipedia because back in the day, his name is Will, but William. But back in the day, the encyclopedias were his internet. So every time he'd go somewhere with Dad, he'd grab like 3 encyclopedias and he'd read them from front to cover. So he knew everything that was in this from A to Z. He would know everything in the encyclopedias. So the guy gets in there and she said, well, I guess you're wondering why I got this Confederate flag on my head. So Will told him, not really. He said, if you want to wear the Tennessee battle flag on your head, that's your business.
Right.
Boy, The
He had
guy
to school. He
started,
had to school him what it was.
yeah, the guy started spinning around in circles. He was like, what? He said, well, see, William, you don't understand. And so he's like, what do I not understand? He said, see, your people were trying to take land from my people. And he was telling the story. He said, hold up. He said, just hold up. He said, so you're telling me the story of us being down south in bondage, okay?
Yeah.
Our people were trying to take your land. And so he got it. He said, yeah. He said, well, then, if you were trying to take our, if your people were trying to take our land, he said, that would make you a Yankee.
Wow.
That boy turned around in circles about 5 or 6 times. So a friend of ours said, Irish, should we be afraid? I'm like, no, these are my people. You know, no need to be afraid. He just doesn't know what he doesn't know.
Yeah.
You know, so that really bothered him that he believes in a flag. He said that it's the Tennessee state flag. And so he said, well, you know, this flag doesn't mean hatred. He said, well, that's not the definition of the person who invented the flag said it was meant for. He
That's
said
right.
it was for those who were superior than people who look like me. You know, so that was basically the story. But he went out of there like, and they're like, William, you and Iris, you guys just always, you know, coming through to enlighten people. He didn't know what to do. He went back in the thunderstorm. He didn't know what to do.
Well,
He just didn't know what to do. You know, and I asked them sometimes, and I said, you know, why do you support, and I'm not a staunch supporter when it comes to politics, because to me, politics is just a game. Everybody's playing it so that they can get whatever they're trying to get out of it. And it sounds nice that you want to help me and all that. You know what I'm saying? But when has anybody truly really helped? You know what I'm saying? When? The things in terms of what we need. So you gonna give me a little handout of money that's really my money anyway? You know what I'm saying? I am the indigenous people. You are the indigenous people. And you gonna give me a little handout from the things you took from me?
yeah.
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense.
So
You know-
they're beginning to read the real story. So that's why they have to do what they were born to do exactly what they were doing at this exact point in time. Because as something tends to end and it is in its existence compared to how it used to be, that's how things are. You know, and I got on my knees and I said, Father, I said, why would you have me born in the 1960s? I was born in 1961. Why would you have me born in the 1960s in the colored wing of a hospital? And just as clear as day when God speaks to you.
Yeah.
He said, so that you could be in this position right now, in this point in time.
Right now.
To make a difference. You were born to be here. I couldn't understand it if I wasn't born when I was born. I just remember going around with my parents, and this lady was tugging on my mom, and I'm looking at my mom, and she has her pearls on, and because she was AKA, she had her pearls on, and she had her gloves and stuff on, like they have on, in the 1960s. And she has my brother in this big old, those big old strollers they used to have that had like shock absorbers on them. They would shake. He was in
With the big wheels.
Yeah, with the big wheels and everything, and the thing that would cover it up and everything that had 4 wheels on it. And so I remember her walking over to my mom, and she's like, "Excuse me." So the lady who worked at the store, she's like, "Oh my God." She said, Can you tell me where I might be able to find a maid? My mother, my mother
Oh
said,
boy.
my mother said, no, I cannot. She said, and when you do, could you please let me know? Because I'm looking for one.
Man.
Wow.
Nice response.
All I
Nice.
remember as I'm holding my mother's hand was
Oh
the
Lord,
expression on that lady's face
I
because, you know,
can
I'm
only
three.
imagine.
I'm three, so I don't know any different. You know what I'm saying? But the expression on that lady's face was unbelievable. And those were the expressions and the stories that I got over and over and over and over again. Now, one of the things that I experienced as a child was the great relationships that my father had with a lot of the Jewish people in Charleston.
Mm.
Because see, they tend to tell you different stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, Dad, I'm like, what's up with the, you know, I can go into any Jewish store, which were most of them were, in downtown Charleston and tell somebody I want that. And they're like, okay, we'll just put it on your account. Okay, I'm 10. I have an account. You know what I'm saying? I that relationship, the way he maneuvered that relationship was just beautiful to me. But when you grow up in Pennsylvania and you go to school with Jewish people and you go to school with people from all different kinds of countries and Puerto Ricans and Chinese and Asian, you have a different perspective
Mhm.
when instead of everybody just looking like you and everybody's in one culture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the stories that I want to tell are the stories of the sharecropper in South Carolina
Mm.
who couldn't read and write. And so my dad would say, that's no excuse. He said, I have teachers that are going to stay after work. And every week we're going to have a potluck when everybody would bring their favorite dish. Because back then, when schools were segregated, there was no budget. The teachers had to come together and collect some money for they got
Mm-hmm.
a piece of bus, they got some money, got some gas. You know, those were the kinds of things that you had to experience back then that as a child I would just look in awe saying this cannot be the work of the God of God. This
Amazing.
cannot be God's work.
Mhm.
The disparity was just, you know, I had some people on Facebook that I met and they said, Iris, you don't know me. But I had 7 brothers and sisters at that elementary school your dad was the principal of before he became the superintendent. He said, we didn't have no money for lunch. He said, but every day he would call us in his office discreetly and hand us money for lunch.
Wow.
Yeah.
So because of that, she said, and lunch was only 10 cents. She said, but we didn't have 10 cents.
That's incredible.
Didn't have 10 cents. These were
Mm.
sharecroppers.
Mhm.
Wasn't making no money. You know, all of their money was going to supplies and everything else. So there was no profit. You never pay the bank back. It's just
No.
like it is now with the credit cards. You never pay it back. How you
No.
gonna pay something back? How's somebody gonna give you some money and charge you all that interest? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole nother story for another day on that one.
Mhm.
Because
It's like
that
loan sharking.
because that right there is worse than what was done to us in slavery.
That's incredible. Well, we only got a minute left. Tell us about you have a documentary on James the Bird Sparrow coming up. Can you
Yes.
kind of tell us about that a little bit and when is that coming out?
Okay. We are still in the process of getting everything completed for that. Like I'd mentioned before, we were working with another group that has hijacked part of the part of the movie cuts that we need, and some of those people passed away. You know that we really needed to have in that movie. So we're working through that to kind of get that. So we're still working on it. So look for that to be out in the fall. Okay.
Okay.
So James the Bird Sparrow is my sweetie pie that I happened to meet one day at a game. And what's so crazy about it, I went to school at Bennett College, which was across the street from North Carolina A&T. And when he graduated in 1979 and left and went to play ball overseas, well, first he was drafted by the Indiana Pacers his junior year, turned it down so he could get a college degree instead, because he would be the first person in his family to get a college degree. So he's like, bump that $30,000 the Indiana Pacers want to pay me. I'm going to get my college degree. So when the Indiana Pacers didn't want him the next time, and now he's a 4-time MEAC champion. Who has 4 championships?
Right.
Back to back to back to back to back. Okay. And MVPs. Okay. So he goes overseas to South America. He leaves in May of 1979. In August of 1979, I transferred to Bennett. So we miss each other. Okay. We totally missed each other. I used to take my basketball, because I'm a baller. I took my basketball and I would go over to Moore Gym at A&T to get pickup games, because the girl pickup games were, not no pickup games. So I would, because we were state champions. Okay. So I went to go get a pickup game over at A&T. And it was just so amazing to me that how I barely missed, our paths didn't cross, then in 1979, but in 2019 they did. So that is just an incredible, incredible story. I met him at a basketball game. I learned about his story. His story is incredible. We had this boy who became an orphan at the age of 5, and all of his brothers and sisters were scattered over every borough of New York City. And so what he did as a 5-year-old his goal was to bring his family back together. And he knew how much his mother and dad loved each other. But when his dad passed away, he just couldn't deal with it. So he went to prep at Laurinburg Institute. First of all, at Staten Island, he was the first player in Staten Island's history to score over 1,000 points. So now he's in the Staten Island Sports Hall of Fame, which is incredible. He was in the class. He was in the class with the defense coach with the Cincinnati Bengals, which is incredible, because I'm like, James, you're part of the Magnificent Seven. You know what I'm saying? You got that was incredible to me. But he was an incredible ball player. I can't tell you when that phone rings and ball players that I admire just are calling, Bird, what's up, Bird? I'm like, James, how you know so-and-so? She's like, man, I've been knowing him for 20, 30, 45 years. You know what I'm saying? So just that kind of guy, but he knew that he had this gift. And so he took this gift, and now he takes this gift to help young people. But the story in between, I'm not going to tell so that you'll be able to see what's going on. But it's an incredible story about this little boy who took it upon himself to bring his brothers and sisters back together again. Can you imagine losing your parents and all your siblings are scattered all over the different boroughs of New York? And then you don't see each other, and then you're able to bring everybody back together through his fame. You're able to bring everybody back together. So that story, I'm looking forward to, and it's Eye on the Sparrow, the James Sparrow story.
That is incredible. Right. Wow. Now, and you have to. James is going to. As a matter of fact, James is going to be on our Saturday sports show this coming Saturday.
He just left out of here a few minutes ago.
Yeah, he's coming on. I talked to him earlier today, and he's coming on Saturday. And we want him back on this particular program platform, and you also. And and perhaps before, and especially when you release the documentary, I would love for you and James to come on together.
We definitely will, because the young lady, again, the Colonel I told you about, she wants to do some more documentaries now because she had that connect. Even though I'm in Atlanta, we've done things with Tyler, but I don't like having his number in my phone. You know what I'm saying? So, so these stories can continue to be. Speak of the devil, here he is. We're talking about you. So, so these stories need to be told, and Eye on the Sparrow is going to be incredible. You want to say something, James? You don't want to talk right now? Here, take my headphones. Here. You don't have to show your face. I did that because it was better to hear that way.
What's good, my people?
Hey, my brother, how are you?
I told you she was incredible.
She is incredible. She is incredible. And we're going to have her back. And you're going to be on Saturday on the sports show. But we
Yeah.
also we want both of you here when you release that documentary.
Oh
We
yeah,
definitely
for
want
sure,
you.
for sure, for sure,
And,
for sure.
That would
And
be
thank you
great.
for everything you do. That
Sure,
you
for
do,
sure.
brother.
I'm headed up to Staten Island to get together with all my childhood friends that I grew up with and get some footage from them, and after that, it's on and popping.
All right, let's do it. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Hey,
after that, it's on and popping. So,
okay,
Keep up the
brother.
good work, brother.
Oh man, thank you, my brother. I'm getting ready to
Yeah.
do my annual clothes drive for the homeless
Yeah.
in about a week. So we've been busy. We've been
Yeah,
busy.
you're doing some incredible
I'm
work.
just trying- yeah, well, hey,
Yeah.
it is what it is, man. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right,
Our
let's see.
chapter is doing the same thing. Good work,
Yeah.
brother.
Again, what I know what it feels like to be walking around with holy shoes and high waters and hand-me-downs and all that good stuff, but I survived,
You
That's it.
survived.
I survived. Mama said
That's
that's all
amazing.
we had. Mama said that's all we had, and that's all I
Yeah.
could do.
That's
So
all you can do.
yeah, that's all I can do. But
Well, we
be
appreciate
grateful.
both you and Iris.
Mhm,
And
man.
Iris, you keep
Yes,
telling
we
your
do.
stories because it's needed, and especially this day and age. You know what I mean? Oh, she can't hear. No, I said, Iris, keep telling your stories because it's definitely needed this day and age. Thank you
It
so
is.
much.
And this is one that I'll tell you about another time. That's the 50th anniversary of Selma.
Wow. You guys got a lot to share. A lot
Man.
to share.
Yeah. Bring it
You
on.
see what's on
Bring
there?
it
They got me
on.
working. See, they got me working.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Good
Absolutely.
work. Good work.
Oh
So
God.
thank you guys so much for everything. And
Thank you
this
so
has been
much
a
for inviting us.
delight. I had no idea. As a matter of fact, the show generally goes 60 minutes. We went 67, and that's okay.
Okay. And I got tons more stories where that came from.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Yeah.
I love it.
Hey,
I love it.
we'll
Iris, you're right on
we'll
time,
talk.
sister. You're right on time.
Thank you.
What's up, Tiff?
Appreciate you.
Hello, hello, hello.
My sister. Yeah, I'm in my watch the game outfit. You know.
Okay. All right. So who's going to win tonight? Who's going to win tonight, James?
Cleveland gonna win tonight.
They need to win tonight.
Yeah, Cleveland gonna beat.
That's
Cleveland
right,
Gonna
that's
beat
right.
Indiana tonight. Indiana gonna wrap it up at home. And that's
Hey,
it.
and you know what? I was happy that New York won last night.
Oh man, yeah, man. Yeah. That was
New York
pretty
is
cool.
doing
that
their
was big
thing.
for New York right there. That was big for New York.
Absolutely, absolutely.
They're scrappy, man. They were scrappy last year, man. So
Yeah.
they on a mission. They on a mission. You
Well,
gotta watch
it's
them teams. You gotta watch them teams that's on a mission, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta watch them
All
teams that's
right.
on a mission. So,
They're hungry.
but
Well, we're looking forward to having you on Saturday. You'll be back with us Saturday.
I'll be there Saturday, man.
All right.
Just been like a busy couple of weeks, man, and just trying to do some good things, man. And good things
doing
take
some great
good things take time. You know what I mean?
That's
They
it.
take up a lot of
Absolutely.
your time. So it ain't
All
that I don't miss you guys and miss being on here.
Hey,
It's
guys.
just that there's other things that that I do that
I understand because
I'm
we're doing
blessed.
the same thing
I'm
with
blessed.
scholarship funds and
Man, I love
feeding
it.
homeless and
I
those type of
love it.
things.
I love it. I'm
do
a
too.
big fan of people that can, man.
sir.
I'm a
Yes,
big
sir.
fan.
Yes, sir.
So
Continue doing that work.
I appreciate that. And
We
you do the same.
appreciate you.
You do the same. You do the same. All right.
You guys, it's been
All
a
right.
pleasure.
All right, my
Thank
brother.
you so much.
It's been
It's a
our
pleasure.
pleasure, believe me. And you keep telling your stories.
Yeah, more
Keep
stories to
telling your
come.
stories.
Okay.
Well,
Ooh,
we
I
need
got
them.
so many of them.
Anytime you want to come on, just let me know. We'll be glad
Okay.
to share it. All right.
Beautiful.
Hey,
Beautiful.
guys, have a great night. And thank you so
You
much.
do the
Thank you,
same.
Tiffany. Thank you, Clayton. James, thank
Good
you
to
so
see
much.
my
Really
people.
appreciate
My
you.
peoples. Good to
Yeah.
see my peoples. Yes.
And you
Hey,
too
guys.
continue to bring your value to the community. We appreciate you so much.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes,
thing.
sir.
Yeah.
Beautiful thing.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah,
That's a
good night.
wrap.
Bye, Clayton.
Another